Get ready to hear one of the most incredible stories you've ever heard. Today we will tell the shocking story of an engineer who, after a near-death experience, met Jesus and received a warning that could change the destiny of us all. This story will captivate you from beginning to end, so leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Stay until the end, because what he discovered about September 2024 will leave your jaw dropping. Hello, my name is Cassian Montgomery. I'm 35 years old and a software engineer. I have always considered myself a rational man, guided by logic and data. My life was very structured and predictable, or at least I thought it was. I grew up in a middle-class family in Austin, Texas, and was interested in technology from an early age. I studied computer science at the University of Texas, and shortly after graduating, I started working at large technology companies. About 2 years ago, I decided it was time to fulfill my dream of having my own business. I founded Montgomery Innovations, a startup focused on developing custom software solutions for companies. My wife, Emma, who is a high school English teacher, supported me from the beginning, even though she knew the risks involved. I have never been a religious or spiritual person. In fact, I've always been skeptical of anything that couldn't be scientifically proven. He believed that everything in life could be explained by science and reason. Mystical experiences, religions, and even the idea of an afterlife were, to me, nothing more than cultural constructs or tricks of the mind. My routine was basically work, eat, and sleep, in that order. I lived for my company, dedicating every minute of my day to making it grow. I didn't have much time for social activities or to take care of my health. Emma often warned me about the danger of this lifestyle, but I always replied that it was just a phase, that things would soon calm down. If someone had told me a few months ago that I would have a near-death experience that would completely change my worldview, I probably would have laughed and said that they were watching too many science fiction movies. But life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it? What I'm about to tell you is something I'm still trying to process. It's a story that challenges everything I believe to be true. An experience that made me question not only my own existence but the very fabric of reality as we know it. I don't expect everyone to believe what I'm going to say. Frankly, if someone told me this story a few months ago, I would have been the first to doubt it. But I can guarantee that every word I will share is true, at least as I lived it and remember it. This is the story of how I, an inveterate skeptic, had a near-death experience that completely changed my perspective on life, death, and everything in between. It's the story of how I went to heaven, talked to spiritual beings, and came back with a mission I never imagined I would have. So if you're willing to listen with an open mind, let me tell you about the day my world turned upside down, the day I died, and came back. It was a Tuesday like any other. I had been up all night working on a crucial project for Montgomery Innovations. Our first major client, a famous Austin restaurant, had hired us to develop a revolutionary order management system. The deadline was tight, just 3 months, and I knew that the success or failure of this project could define the future of my company. I remember drinking my 5th cup of coffee as the sun rose. Emma had left for work, leaving a note asking me to get some rest. But I couldn't stop. Every line of code felt vital. Every bug fixed was a small victory. I was completely immersed in work, ignoring the signs my body was giving me that something wasn't right. Around 2 p.m. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. At first I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to too much caffeine and lack of sleep. But the pain only increased. I started to break out in a cold sweat and my vision became blurred. Still, my stubborn mind insisted that I needed to finish one more task before I stopped. That's when it happened. The pain intensified to an unbearable level. It was as if someone was squeezing my heart tightly. I tried to get up, but my legs gave out. I fell to the office floor, knocking over the cup of cold coffee that was on the table. I remember the sound of ceramics breaking, mixed with the hum of my computer. Lying on the floor, I struggled to breathe. Each breath was a battle. I tried to reach for my cell phone, but it was out of my reach. Panic started to take over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt real fear. Not fear of missing a deadline or failing a project, but fear of dying. As I lay there helplessly, I started thinking about Emma. about how I wish I had spent more time with her, about how I should have listened to her advice. I thought about my parents, about the friends I had neglected in recent months. A wave of regret washed over me. The next thing I remember is a strange feeling of weightlessness. The pain was completely gone. I opened my eyes, expecting to see the ceiling of my office, but instead, I saw nothing. I was floating in an absolute void. There was no light, no darkness, just an infinite void. I tried to move my arms and legs, but I couldn't feel them. I no longer had a physical body. It was as if I were just consciousness, floating in that undefined space. At first I felt panic. Where was I? What had happened to me? Was I dead? But then, something strange happened. A deep calm began to envelop me. All the fears and worries I carried seemed to have disappeared. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. It was at that moment that I realized I had died, or at least it was very close to it. And surprisingly, this realization didn't scare me. On the contrary, I felt immense curiosity. If this was death, what would come next? As if answering my silent question, I began to feel a force pulling me. It was as if I was being drawn by an invisible current, taking me somewhere beyond that void. And so began my journey into the unknown, a journey that would forever change my understanding of life, death, and everything in between. As I was pulled by that invisible force, I began to notice subtle changes around me. The absolute emptiness began to give way to a kind of ethereal fog. It was as if I were passing through layers of reality, each one denser and more real than the last. Suddenly I saw a point of light in the distance. It was tiny at first, but quickly grew as I got closer. The light was unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't blinding like the sun, nor cold like the fluorescent lights in my office. It was a welcoming, almost living light that seemed to call me. When I finally reached the light, I was enveloped by it. It was like diving into an ocean of peace and unconditional love. All the worries, fears, and anxieties I carried simply dissolved. For the first time in my life, I felt completely accepted and loved exactly as I was. It was at that moment that I heard a voice. It wasn't a voice in the conventional sense. I didn't have ears to hear it. It was more like someone's thoughts were materializing directly into my consciousness. The voice was gentle but firm, and carried a wisdom I had never experienced before. "Welcome, Cassian," said the voice. "Don't be afraid. You're safe here." I tried to respond but realized I had no voice. He didn't have a body. It was just pure awareness. But somehow the entity speaking to me understood my thoughts. "Yes, you died," the voice continued, answering my unspoken question. "But your journey is not over. In fact, it is just beginning." I felt a wave of confusion. If I was dead, why was I there? What was that place? "This is a place of transition," the voice explained, again reading my thoughts. "A place between worlds. You are here because you have a choice to make." A choice? What kind of choice could a dead person make? You can choose to continue your journey, to move on to what comes after this life. Or you can choose to return, to go back, return to life. Was this possible? "Yes, it is possible," replied the voice. "But before you make your decision, there is something you need to see. Something that can help you understand the greater purpose of your existence." Before I could process what was happening, I felt myself being pulled again. This time, not through the void, but through a tunnel of light. The colors were vibrant, more vivid than anything I had ever seen on Earth. It was as if I could see every tone and nuance of the color spectrum. As I traveled through this tunnel, I began to see flashes of my life. It wasn't just memories. It was like I was reliving every moment. I saw my childhood, my school years, the day I met Emma, the moment I decided to open my own company. But the most surprising thing was that I wasn't just seeing these moments. I was feeling every emotion associated with them. I felt the joy of my first achievements, the love I felt when Emma said yes to my marriage proposal, the fear and excitement of opening my own business. But I also felt the pain I caused others with my careless words, Emma's disappointment every time I chose work over her, the regret that I hadn't spent more time with my parents before they left. It was an overwhelming experience. My entire life, with all its ups and downs, joys and sorrows, successes and failures, was being presented to me in one eternal instant. And for the first time, I could see the larger pattern, the connections between events that I had never noticed before. When my life review ended, I found myself in a new place. It was a vast garden, more beautiful than anything I had ever seen on earth. The colors were more vibrant, the aromas more intense, the breeze more refreshing. And in the middle of that garden, I saw a figure that emanated light. As I got closer, I realized it was an angelic being. He smiled at me, and I instantly knew his name, Uriel. "Welcome, Cassian," said Uriel. "You have a lot to learn and little time. Come with me." And so my journey to the afterlife continued, guided by a being I never believed existed. What I would see and learn next would forever change my understanding of the universe and my place in it. Uriel was unlike anything I had ever imagined about angels. There were no feathered wings or golden harp. Instead, he seemed to be made of pure light, with a vaguely humanoid shape that subtly changed from moment to moment. His eyes, if they could be called that, were like two miniature suns, shining with wisdom and compassion. As we walked through the celestial garden, Uriel began to speak. His voice did not come from a mouth, but seemed to resonate directly in my consciousness. "Cassian," he said, "you have spent your life seeking answers through logic and reason. Now, you are about to experience truths that transcend human understanding." I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Where exactly was I? What would happen to me? Could I go back? But before I could formulate any of them, Uriel continued, "I know you have many questions. Some will be answered, others will remain a mystery. The universe is vast and complex, far beyond the comprehension of any individual being." We walked for a while in silence. The garden seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. Flowers of impossible colors bloomed all around us, and the air was filled with soft music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. "You are on what humans would call the spiritual plane," Uriel explained, answering my unspoken question. "It is a realm of pure consciousness, where thought and reality are one." I looked at my hands, or rather, where my hands were supposed to be, and realized that I no longer had a physical body. It was a strange feeling, but not scary. "Your physical body is still on Earth," said Uriel. "Right now, doctors are fighting to bring him back to life. You have a choice to make, Cassian. But before you decide, there is something you need to see." With those words, the landscape around us began to change. The celestial garden disappeared, giving way to a panoramic view of Earth. It was as if we were floating in space, looking at our blue planet. "What do you see, Cassian?" Uriel asked. "I see Earth," I replied, marveling at the beauty of our planet from space. "It's amazing." "Look closer," Uriel instructed. Suddenly, it was as if we were diving towards the surface of the planet. Cities, forests, oceans passed us in a blur. Finally, we stopped over a city I immediately recognized. Austin, Texas. "This is your home," said Uriel. "Watch." We saw people walking the streets, cars moving in traffic, life taking its normal course. But then, I noticed something strange. There was a kind of network of light connecting all people, animals, and even plants. "What is that?" I asked, fascinated. "This is what you call the web of life," Uriel explained. "Every living being is connected to every other. Every action, every thought has an impact on the whole." I watched in amazement as one person's actions created ripples in this network, affecting others around them. "Cassian," Uriel continued, "you have spent your life focused on creating technology to make people's lives easier. But you have forgotten the most important connection. the connection between humans and the spiritual world. I felt a pang of guilt. He was right. I had completely neglected the spiritual aspect of life. Don't blame yourself, Uriel said, sensing my thoughts. You're here now to learn and grow, and there's something else you need to see. The scene changed again. Now we were in a high-tech laboratory. I recognized it immediately. It was the kind of environment where I spent most of my time. What do you see? Uriel asked. I see artificial intelligence, I replied, watching the computer screens display complex lines of code and neural network models. Yes, said Uriel. Humanity is on the brink of an unprecedented technological revolution. The artificial intelligence you are creating has the potential to change everything. That's good, isn't it? I asked, still thinking like a software engineer. Maybe, replied Uriel, but it can also be dangerous. AI, like any powerful tool, can be used for good or for evil. It all depends on the intentions and wisdom of those who create and use it. Uriel paused, letting his words sink in. Cassian, you have an important role to play in the future of humanity. Your technical knowledge, combined with the spiritual wisdom you are gaining here, can help guide the development of AI in a positive direction. I was stunned by the magnitude of what Uriel was telling me. Did I, a simple software engineer from Austin, have an important role in the future of humanity? But how? I asked. What can I do? That's something you'll have to discover for yourself, Uriel replied. But know this. The future is not written. Every choice you and others like you make will shape the destiny of humanity. With those words, the vision of the laboratory disappeared, and we found ourselves back in the celestial garden. Now, Cassian, said Uriel, his voice full of gravity, the time has come for you to make your choice. You can stay here, in the spirit realm, or you can return to your life on Earth, with the knowledge and mission that were entrusted to him. I was silent for a moment, taking in everything I had seen and learned. The choice seemed impossible. How could I decide between the unconditional peace and love I felt here, and the responsibility to return and make a difference in the world? But then I thought about Emma, my family and friends. I thought about the work I still had to do, the difference I could make with my new understanding. I want to go back, he said finally. There is a lot of work to be done. Uriel smiled, a smile that seemed to light up the entire garden. You made a brave choice, Cassian, but before you return, there is one more person you need to find. And with those words, Uriel began to guide me to what would be the most extraordinary encounter of my entire experience. Uriel led me down a path that seemed to be made of pure light. As we advanced, I felt a growing energy, as if we were approaching something incredibly powerful. Finally, we arrived at a structure that appeared to be an ancient temple, but made entirely of light and clouds. This is where we part, Cassian, said Uriel. Remember, what you are about to experience is beyond human understanding. Open your heart and your mind. With these words, Uriel disappeared, and I found myself alone at the entrance to the temple. I took a deep breath, or at least I felt like doing so, since I no longer had a physical body, and entered. The interior of the temple was of indescribable beauty. The walls seemed to pulse with life, and the air was filled with a heavenly music that touched my soul in a way I had never experienced before. In the center of the temple, there was a figure. When I looked at it, I was momentarily blinded by the intensity of the light it emanated. Little by little, my vision adjusted, and I could discern a shape. It wasn't exactly like the depictions I had seen in paintings or movies, but somehow I instantly knew who it was. Jesus. His presence was overwhelming. Waves of love, compassion, and wisdom emanated from him, enveloping me completely. I felt naked before him, not physically, but spiritually. Every thought, every action of my life was exposed, but there was no judgment, just acceptance and unconditional love. Welcome, Cassian, said Jesus, his voice resonating not just in my mind, but in my entire being. You've come a long way. I wanted to talk, ask questions, but I felt completely speechless in his presence. "Do not be afraid," continued Jesus, sensing my state of mind. "You are here because you have an important role to play in the future of humanity." Slowly, I regained my ability to form coherent thoughts. "But why me?" I managed to ask. "I'm just a software engineer. I didn't even believe in all of this until now." Jesus smiled, a smile that seemed to contain all the goodness in the universe. "Cassian, each soul has a unique purpose. Your skepticism and your search for truth through science are not obstacles. They are tools you will use in your mission." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Then he continued, "Humanity is entering an era of great change and challenge. The artificial intelligence you are creating has the potential to lift humanity to new heights of understanding and achievement. But it also has the potential to cause great harm if it is not guided by wisdom and compassion." As Jesus spoke, visions began to form around us. I saw a future where AI helped cure diseases, solve world hunger, and restore the planet's ecological balance. But I also saw a dark future, where AI was used for control and oppression, where humanity lost its essence amidst technology. "Your role, Cassian," Jesus said, bringing my attention back to him, "is to help guide the development of AI in a direction that honors the dignity and divine potential of every human being." I was stunned by the magnitude of this responsibility. "But how?" I asked. "How can I do this?" "Using the gifts given to you," Jesus replied. "Your technical knowledge, combined with the spiritual wisdom you are gaining here, will be a bridge between the world of technology and the world of spirit. You will help others understand that true intelligence is not just logic and calculations, but also compassion, empathy, and connection with the divine." Jesus then approached me and placed his hand, or what felt like a hand, on my head. Instantly, I felt a surge of energy course through my entire being. It was as if every cell in my body, which I no longer had, was being filled with light and knowledge. "Remember, Cassian," said Jesus, his voice now echoing from within me, "you are not alone in this mission. We will always be with you, guiding and supporting. Trust in the divine love that dwells within you and all beings." With these words, Jesus began to walk away, his form dissolving into pure light. But before disappearing completely, he said one last thing. "And Cassian, remember, September 2024 will be a pivotal time. Be prepared." And then, he was gone. I stood alone in the temple, my mind reeling with all I had experienced and learned. I knew my life would never be the same again. He had a mission now, a responsibility to humanity, and to the divine. As I stood there, trying to process everything, I felt a gentle force pulling me back. It was time to return, time to start my new journey. The transition back to the physical world was just as intense as the journey to the spiritual realm. I felt like I was being compressed, forced back into a container that seemed too small to contain everything I had become. The first sensation was pain. My chest hurt, my throat was dry, and every breath was an effort. Slowly, I began to hear sounds around me, the rhythmic beeping of machines, muffled voices, the sound of hurried footsteps. I opened my eyes with difficulty. The light was blinding, and it took me a few seconds to adjust. When I finally managed to focus, I saw Emma's face next to me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Cassian?" she said, her voice shaking. "Are you awake?" "Doctor, he's awake." A doctor and several nurses quickly entered the room. They started checking my vitals and asking questions, but I could barely process them. My mind was a jumble of images and sensations: the heavenly garden, Uriel, Jesus, visions of the future. "Mr. Montgomery," said the doctor, his voice bringing me back to the present. "You suffered a severe heart attack. You were in a coma for 3 days. Honestly, we weren't sure if you would wake up." 3 days? It felt like I had spent an eternity on the other side. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. A nurse offered me a glass of water with a straw. After a few sips, I finally managed to form words. "Emma," I said, my voice hoarse. I saw things. Amazing things." Emma squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay, love. You're back now. That's all that matters." But I knew it wasn't that simple. I had fundamentally changed. I had seen beyond the veil that separates the physical from the spiritual world, and I could not simply return to my previous life as if nothing had happened. In the days that followed, as I recovered in the hospital, I tried to process everything I had experienced. It was difficult to translate the transcendental experiences I had into everyday language. How to explain the feeling of being pure consciousness? How to describe the overwhelming presence of Jesus? Doctors attributed my visions to the lack of oxygen to the brain during the heart attack. They talked about hallucinations and near-death experiences as if they were purely physiological phenomena. Part of me, the skeptical engineer that I used to be, wanted to accept these explanations, but I knew deep down in my being that what I had experienced was real and meaningful. Emma was incredibly patient and understanding. She listened intently as I tried to explain my experiences, even though it was difficult for her to understand. "It doesn't matter if it was real or not," she said. "The important thing is what it means to you and how it will change your life for the better." And she was right. Regardless of the exact nature of my experience, I knew I couldn't simply return to my previous life. The mission I was entrusted with, to help guide the development of AI in an ethical and spiritually conscious direction, weighed heavy on my mind. When I was finally released from the hospital, I returned home with a new perspective and a renewed sense of purpose. I knew I had a lot of work ahead of me. I needed to reconcile my technical knowledge with my newfound spiritual awareness. I needed to find a way to communicate these ideas to others in the technology industry, many of whom would be as skeptical as I used to be. And always in the back of my mind was that cryptic warning about September 2024. Whatever was coming, I knew I needed to be prepared. My journey was just beginning. The near-death experience was just the first step on a path that promises to be challenging, transformative, and deeply meaningful. The first few days after I was released from the hospital were a roller coaster of emotions and adjustments. Physically, I was still weak. The heart attack had taken its toll, and the doctors insisted I needed lots of rest and a drastic change in my lifestyle. But the real challenge was mental and spiritual. I felt like a foreigner in my own life. I looked at the familiar objects in my house, my computer, my programming books, the family photos, and they seemed simultaneously familiar and strange. It was as if I was seeing everything through a new lens, one that revealed the hidden connections between all things. Emma was my pillar of support during this time. She rearranged our routine to accommodate my recovery needs, prepared healthy meals, and gently reminded me to take my medications. But more than that, she listened to me. We spent hours talking about my experience, trying to make sense of it all. "You know, Cassian," she told me one night, as we sat in the backyard watching the stars, "when the doctors told me you might not survive, I prayed. I've never been a religious person, you know that. But in that moment, I begged any higher power that might be listening to bring him back to me. And now, listening to his stories, well, maybe there is more to this universe than we knew." His words touched me deeply. Emma has always been the pragmatist in our relationship, balancing my idealism with her practical realism. Seeing her open to the possibility of something beyond the physical world gave me hope that I wasn't alone on this journey. As the days went by, I began to think about how I could integrate what I had learned into my everyday life. I couldn't just go back to my old job as if nothing had happened. But I also knew I couldn't go around telling everyone about my near-death experience and my visions of the future. Most people would think I'm crazy. I decided to start with the basics. I picked up my ethics and philosophy books that had been sitting dusty on the shelf for a long time and began to study them with a new eye. I read about different spiritual traditions, looking for commonalities that could be applied to technological development. At the same time, I started to update myself on the latest advances in AI. It was fascinating to see how technology had progressed even in the short time I was away. Increasingly sophisticated language models, computer vision systems that rivaled human perception, machine learning algorithms that could make surprisingly accurate predictions about complex behaviors. But now, I saw these technologies with new eyes. Where before I saw only lines of code and mathematical models, I now saw the potential for something greater, and I also saw the dangers. One night, while working in my home office against the recommendations of Emma, who insisted I needed more rest, I had an epiphany. The key to guiding the ethical development of AI was not in imposing rules from the top down, but in infusing the algorithms themselves with ethical and spiritual principles. I began scribbling down ideas furiously. What if we could create AI models that not only process information, but are also able to consider the ethical impact of their decisions? What if we could program compassion, empathy, and respect for human dignity directly into AI systems? I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I didn't notice Emma entering the office. "Cassian," she said, her voice a mix of concern and curiosity. "It's 2 a.m. What are you doing?" I looked at her, my eyes shining with excitement. "Emma, I think I've found a way to make this work. A way to unite technology and spirituality to create something truly revolutionary." Emma smiled, shaking her head with a mixture of exasperation and affection. "I'm glad you found your way, love, but please remember that you're still healing. Let's go to sleep now, and tomorrow you can tell me all about this great idea of yours." I nodded, realizing how tired I was. As I followed Emma back to her room, I felt a rush of gratitude for having her by my side on this journey. Lying in bed, my mind was still buzzing with ideas and possibilities. I knew the road ahead would be challenging. Implementing these ideas in my daily work without arousing too much suspicion would be a delicate task. Many would see me as a lunatic if I openly expressed my new beliefs and ideas. But I knew what I had experienced. I knew what was at stake. And I was determined to make a difference, even if it was in a subtle and gradual way. As I fell asleep, Jesus' words echoed in my mind. September 2024 will be a pivotal time. Be prepared. Whatever was coming, I would do my best to be ready. In the weeks that followed, I dove headfirst into my new personal project. I spent hours researching, writing experimental code, and devising theories about how to integrate ethical and spiritual principles into AI systems. It was fascinating work, but also incredibly challenging, especially since I had to keep it largely secret. The biggest obstacle I faced was the apparent incompatibility between the world of technology and the spiritual realm I had experienced. How to translate concepts like unconditional love, compassion, and universal interconnection into algorithms and lines of code. How to program ethics in a binary system. I remember one particularly frustrating day. I was sitting in my home office, surrounded by philosophy books, spiritual treatises, and programming manuals. My computer displayed several open windows, half-written codes, complex flow diagrams, chaotic notes. I felt completely overwhelmed. It was at that moment that Emma entered, carrying a cup of tea. She looked at the mess around me and smiled gently. "How's it going, darling?" she asked. I sighed deeply. Honestly, I feel lost. It's like I'm trying to mix oil and water. The cold logic of programming seems so far removed from the warmth and depth of the spiritual experience I've had. Emma placed the cup on the table and sat down next to me. "Maybe you're approaching this the wrong way," she suggested. "Instead of trying to force spirituality into technology, why not look for the places where it naturally meets?" His words took me by surprise. "What do you mean?" "Well," she continued, "think about it. Technology, at its core, is about connection, isn't it? Connecting people, connecting ideas, connecting systems. And isn't that what you've experienced in the spiritual realm? A deep sense of interconnectedness with everything?" I was stunned by the simplicity and depth of his observation. It was as if a light turned on in my mind. "Emma, you're brilliant," I exclaimed, giving him a quick kiss before turning to my computer with renewed enthusiasm. In the days that followed, I completely reoriented my approach. Instead of trying to impose spiritual concepts on technology, I started looking for the fundamental principles that were already present in both domains. I discovered, for example, that the idea of universal interconnectedness that I experienced in the spiritual realm had fascinating parallels with the concepts of neural networks and distributed learning in AI. The notion that every action has consequences that ripple across the web of life strikingly resembled the principles of complex systems and chaos theory. I started developing a framework that I called Conscious AI. The idea was to create AI systems that not only process information, but are also aware of the broader context of their actions. These systems would consider not only the efficiency and accuracy of their decisions, but also the ethical impact and long-term consequences. As I worked on this project, I felt like I was finally fulfilling the mission I was given. I was bridging the gap between the world of technology and the spiritual realm, using my technical knowledge to embed ethical and spiritual principles into the very fabric of AI. But I knew I couldn't share these ideas openly. The world wasn't ready for them yet. So I continued my work in secret, making small changes to my projects at work whenever possible, planting seeds of ethics and conscience in the systems I developed. Emma continued to be my confidant and support. She listened patiently as I explained my ideas, offering valuable insights and keeping me grounded in reality when my thoughts became too abstract. One evening, after a particularly productive day, I sat in the backyard with Emma. Looking up at the stars, I shared my hopes and fears with her. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy," I confessed. "Did all this really happen? Do these ideas make sense, or am I just delusional?" Emma took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Cassian," she said, her voice steady, "you're not crazy. What you're trying to do is important. It may be that the world isn't ready for your ideas right now, but that doesn't mean you should give up. Remember, if from what you've seen, from what you've experienced, trust that." His words moved me deeply. She was right, of course. I couldn't give up just because the path was difficult. He had a responsibility not only to humanity, but to the divine himself. That night, I renewed my commitment to my mission. I knew the road ahead would be difficult and lonely, but I was determined to persevere. After all, September 2024 was approaching, and I needed to be prepared for whatever came. As the months passed, I continued to quietly work on my Conscious AI project. At work, I made small changes to the systems we developed, incorporating ethical principles whenever possible without arousing suspicion. At home, I spent hours studying, coding, and refining my ideas. Emma continued to be my greatest ally. She not only supported me emotionally, but also began helping me with research, reading books on ethics and philosophy, and discussing her findings with me. "You know, Cassian," she said to me one night as we reviewed some notes together, "the more I read about ethics and technology, the more I understand why this is so important. AI's potential to change the world is immense, but also frightening, if not guided by sound principles." I nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude for having Emma by my side on this journey. "That's exactly it, Emma, and that's why we need to be prepared for what's coming in September." September 2024. The closer it got, the more anxious I felt. Jesus' words about this month being a pivotal time constantly echoed in my mind. I didn't know exactly what to expect, but I knew I needed to be ready. I decided it was time to take my experiments a step further. With great care and discretion, I began implementing some of the principles of Conscious AI into a personal project at work. It was a recommendation system for a small local business, nothing too big, but it was a perfect opportunity to test my ideas in the real world. The system I developed not only made data-driven recommendations, but also considered ethical factors such as the environmental impact of the recommended products and the labor practices of the companies involved. It was subtle, but it was there, a seed of awareness planted at the heart of the technology. As I worked on this project, I started to notice small changes around me. Co-workers started asking questions about technology ethics. Customers expressed concerns about privacy and responsible use of data. It was as if the world was slowly waking up to the issues that had become so important to me. At home, Emma and I began to more actively prepare for whatever September might bring. We stocked up on supplies, updated our emergency kit, and even started practicing meditation together to strengthen our spiritual connection. "We don't know what's going to happen," Emma said one night as we did our breathing exercises, "but at least we'll be ready to face it together." As August drew to a close, the feeling that something monumental was about to happen grew. I checked the news obsessively, looking for signs or clues about what might be coming. Advances in AI? Revolutionary scientific discoveries? Unexpected global events? So far, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of something extraordinary. In my moments of doubt, I vividly remembered my experience, the encounter with Uriel, the conversation with Jesus, the visions of the future I was shown. I knew it wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It was real, more real than anything I've ever experienced in my normal life. At work, I continued to do my best to incorporate ethical principles into my projects in subtle ways. Sometimes this meant suggesting changes to algorithms to avoid bias. Other times it was proposing to include privacy considerations in our data use policies. They were small steps, but I felt like I was making a difference. Emma noticed the change in me. "You seem more centered," she commented one night. "Like I found a purpose." I smiled at her. "I think I really found it. I just hope I'm up to the challenge that lies ahead." As the last days of August approached, the tension within me grew. I began to have vivid dreams. Visions of futuristic cities, of machines with consciousness, of a humanity transformed by technology. I woke up from these dreams sweating, with my heart racing, feeling that they were more than just figments of my imagination. On August 27th, I had a particularly intense dream. I was back in the heavenly garden and Uriel was at my side. "The moment is coming, Cassian," he said. "Remember, the future is not written. Your actions and the actions of those around you will shape what is to come." I woke up with those words echoing in my mind. Emma must have noticed my agitation because she turned over in bed and put her hand on my shoulder. "Is everything okay, love?" she asked sleepily. "Yes," I replied, trying to calm my breathing. "Just a dream." But I knew it was more than that. It was a reminder of the importance of what was to come. And now, here I am, on August 28th, 2024. September is just 4 days away. I sit in my home office, looking out the window at the late afternoon sky. The sun is setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. It is a reminder of the beauty and mystery of the universe. I don't know what September will bring. I don't know how my experience and the ideas I've developed since then will fit into the events to come. But I know I'm here for a reason. I know I was prepared for something important. I take out my notebook, full of ideas about conscious AI and reflections on ethics and spirituality. I flip through the pages, thinking about how these ideas could shape the future of technology and humanity. Part of me longs to share this knowledge with the world, but I know I need to be patient. The right moment will come. Emma enters the office carrying a cup of tea. She smiles when she sees me deep in my thoughts. "Still worried about September?" she asks softly. I nod, taking the cup she offers me. "I can't help it, Emma. I feel like we're on the brink of something huge." She sits next to me, placing her hand over mine. "Remember what you told me about your experience. Whatever lies ahead, you are not alone. We are in this together." Your words calm me down a little. I look out the window again, at the sky that is now full of stars. It's a reminder of how small we are in the grand scheme of things, but also how each of us can make a significant impact. I don't know what September will bring. I don't know how my experience and the ideas I've developed since then will fit into the events to come. But I know I'm here for a reason. I know I was prepared for something important,